Hello everybody and welcome back to Pravus Gaming and more Democracy 3 Presidential Suite, playing as Sweden. So I've been thinking about this series over the last couple of days, and I'm gonna be honest with you guys, I'm not really feeling it right now. I'm not quite satisfied with the direction that this series has been going. Not because the mod pack is failing me, the mod pack is awesome, and not because Sweden isn't an interesting place to play and we haven't been doing an acceptable job. I think that we have. I think that the problem is I've been playing it a little bit too cautious lately. I think that I've been approaching this game the same sort of way that I would the base game of Democracy 3 when I'm really being a tryhard and trying to optimize a nation, where whether I'm playing liberal capitalist or conservative socialist or theocratic, whatever it is, I want to solve every problem in the country and show that, you know, with the right strategy, with any particular policies, you can make it work, you know? That's what I've done in the past. And I don't think that that's going to be that easy in this particular mod pack, and frankly, I'm not even sure it's really attainable. I'm not sure that I'm ever going to solve dementia, per se. I don't know if I'm ever going to solve the drug addiction or traffic, accidents. I'm not sure that's something I really can do. And if we're going for a more libertarian-ish playthrough, then maybe it's not really my job to solve it. Maybe instead, I should be a bit more ideologically driven rather than more pragmatic and kind of realistic here. Maybe instead, I should be making some sweeping changes to Sweden, and we just sort of see where the chips fall. And maybe I'll do the best I can to make it fall in a good place, but maybe that's all we do. And I kind of want to go for that. I kind of want to make some huge changes to the way that we do our taxes, the way that our economy runs, changing up our welfare system in a huge way. I kind of want to experiment. It's not to say that I'm going to get rid of everything, right? I'm not going to go for a more anarcho-capitalist playthrough, that wing of libertarianism. I can't even go for a completely, low-footprint, small government. To an extent, in Democracy 3, that's just not going to be possible, but I can reduce quite a bit, and I can change the way that the system operates quite a bit. So that's kind of what I want to go for. And for those of you who are interested in seeing that, I hope that you will stick around and kind of give me some ideas, because this is going to be interesting, I think. I have some ideas, so stand by and let's see what happens. Sexism has come back. Oh, yay! It's because we got rid of the maternity leave. We also reduced abortion law to make that a little bit more neutral, in part because it was upsetting the religious so incredibly much. On-demand abortion in this particular game tends to have some really drastic penalties, whereas if you're a little bit more moderate, a little bit more middle of the road, it's not so bad. So that's kind of what I was going for, but the lack of maternity leave is really hitting us. Well, that's fine. We can deal with that. I know what to do with there. We have a new major party donor. Okay, he's trying to get in on the action since we have, 100% of the vote and all that. Water fluoridization, or fluoridation. There we go. With the poor dental health in our country, experts suggest that we add sodium fluoride to tap water. This would reduce tooth decay. However, environmentalists are concerned about tampering with our public water supply. Interesting. Is it actually programmed into the mod pack that if we have certain negative events, we are more likely to get something like this? Because that's awesome if so. Let's see. Fluoridate the water. It's a cost-efficient measure with no serious side effects and can benefit poor families without access to dentistry. Or a slippery slope for additives into tap water, food, and indoor air. So, I suspect that this is the more libertarian-ish kind of argument here. However, we have to deal with the tooth decay somehow, and somehow I find this to be the least egregious solution rather than creating a public dental service, right? Public health care, but for dentistry. That wouldn't be very libertarian at all either. So rather than deal with the issue directly with government services, this is a very simple way of trying to fix it, and let's see what happens. Also, I've never seen that event, and I want to see how effective it is, so sue me. That's what's going to happen. All right. Economy is starting to pick back up a little bit. Poverty is on the rise, unfortunately. We're going to have to deal with that. How's the global economy? Well, it is actually starting to bounce back up a little bit. Okay, good, and actually our rate of increase of the GDP is outpacing the global economy, so that's a good sign. Okay, yes, excellent. So it looks like pretty soon we're going to start getting our GDP up and maybe we'll start enjoying some more wealth. Well, that's excellent. Okay, then if we're going to do things like that, there are a few things I want to do. First off, I need to help reduce unemployment. And to that extent, one thing I thought about doing was actually trying to help fix our military spending a little bit. Right now, it's very low. We have just reservist armies, very defensive. right? We could instead increase this a little bit to, let's say, about 25 billion. Now, what are the benefits of doing so? Well, state employees are happier, and there are going to be a few more of them. Unemployment goes down. We hire people for our military. It also increases our military strength, which is important for a few reasons. I'll show you guys in just a second. Actually, let's just look at it now. Why not? Military strength improves international trade because we're better able to protect our borders. But right now it's so low that it's upsetting the Patriots. Actually, I don't know. Is this inverted? Does international trade go down and Patriots get happier? I'm not too sure. I do know that military strength will impact things like cyber warfare and a few other events, which we haven't really necessarily run into yet. Also, I kind of want to increase this because, at least as a more of a small government person myself, although I'm not a libertarian per se, I would actually say that military spending is one of the legitimate expenditures of government, one of the legitimate uses of force. To me, anyway, the ideal government is supposed to be small, but it has a very specific job, namely to preserve and protect our natural rights, those being explored through the Enlightenment era and so on. And to that extent, I think that legitimate force by government includes the military and the police force to protect us from threats, domestic threats, that would threaten our natural rights, our right to life and liberty and so on. And also the military to protect us against foreign threats that would threaten our natural rights. So protecting its citizens in those ways, I think, is completely legitimate, and I kind of want to just increase this a little bit on principle. It also strengthens our aerospace industry a little bit, which I do like. By the way, speaking of industries, apparently there is a fifth one, automotive. I'm guessing that one is directly tied into car usage. Well, that's traffic. Car usage, which we have been keeping kind of low, so maybe we'll get it someday, maybe we won't. We'll kind of see, but in the meantime, I think that that would be a good thing. In the meantime, though, if we're going to spend $25 billion, we need to make a little bit of money back somehow. And looking along the expenditures, healthcare vouchers, school vouchers, state schools, state pensions, still pretty expensive, surprisingly. Black market's hurting us a lot. We could go to something like the immigrant language courses, which we've reduced immigration quite a bit, so maybe this isn't as critical for us right now, and we can reduce this down to about $3 billion, save a few billion there. Yeah, that'd be okay, I think. That shouldn't hurt us too much. We're going to go down to subsidized courses rather than universal mandated government courses. I think that'll be okay. Since sexism did come back, let's go ahead and shift our money away from the maternity care, which we reduced down to half pay, and instead focus on child care provisioning, which will do something kind of similar, right? When women have children, they'll be able to go back to work and know that their children should be more or less taken care of without bankrupting themselves trying to hire a nanny or something along those lines. So basically, this is going to directly impact sexism. I don't think this is a very libertarian thing to do at all, but it's something I feel like we're going to have to kind of do. So sexism goes down, unemployment goes down, which is good for the economy, and this is actually going to improve the economy with productivity, as opposed to the maternity care, which greatly reduced productivity. And considering Sweden started with 0, we need more. It does seem to upset the religious for some reason, which I find a little surprising. Well, okay, no, I guess that makes a little bit of sense. Maybe it's that the religious don't like that children are not being raised by their parents, and their parents aren't instilling good moral values. Well, considering religious only make up like 2% of the population, I'm not sure that's going to matter. So that will be our method of trying to deal sexism and kind of recorrect after reducing our maternity leave, while still boosting the economy as much as we are able to. Speaking of the religious, though, I actually forgot to mention this earlier. So I think in the last video I made a mistake. I think that when I was looking at poverty, I criticized the game saying, wait a minute, why does religious membership increase poverty? I was assuming that because we have some positive religious membership impact here, that it will continue to go up, right? As we increase religious membership, poverty therefore gets more and more affected. That's kind of what I was assuming, and I made that mistake. I think I'm wrong on that point. I think actually it's inverted. The reason it's having a positive impact is because we have such incredibly low religious membership, only 2%. I'm willing to bet that actually if we increased it, we'd see the effect going the opposite direction and it would reduce poverty. So to that extent, I think I made a mistake and a correction is warranted. Although I will say, I did find it very interesting in the last video, seeing some comments trying to suggest that maybe religious membership actually would result in increased poverty. Actually, quite a few people were suggesting, well, if you look at the religious nations in certain parts of the world, Middle East, that it's relatively poor. Whereas if you look at the less religious, more atheistic, well, not completely atheistic, but you know what I mean, less religious nations like the West, there's a lot of wealth. which I thought was an interesting argument. Now, granted, these people did admit that correlation does not equal causation, and that's good, but basically you're saying correlation implies some sort of causation, which I'm not sure if that's an argument you really want to make. And here's why, because there's a very easy counterpoint to this. And I can sum it up in 4 letters. USSR. Guys, I think we forget about this a little bit. So after the Russian Revolution led by the Bolsheviks in 1917 and the rise of the USSR by 1922, before that, the Orthodox Church in Russia was heavily integrated into the autocratic state, right? It enjoyed a lot of different privileges. It was very much the clergy you expect of the Western world, of Europe and such, maybe a couple hundred years ago and stuff like that. So the Russian Orthodox Church was very much involved in that. After the revolution, though, and the rise of communism and the establishment of the USSR, Lenin specifically wanted to turn the nation more into an atheistic country. In fact, he very much relied on Karl Marx's ideas that religion is the opiate of the masses. So the result being, they seized a lot of church property, hundreds of priests, Orthodox priests, were killed, all religion was mocked and ridiculed, and state atheism was taught in schools. And you may say, well, okay, so what? Well, I don't know. Correlation implies causation, right? What did the USSR have? They were not wealthy, they were not healthy, they were not free, and tens of millions were murdered. So are you sure you want to go with that argument? I don't think you do. Now, I think that actually, you could say that there is some causation involved, but I think logically it is actually more reversed. I think that you could argue that the wealthier a society is, the less likely it is to be religious in the first place. Think about it. The more wealthy and healthy and free that you are, the less you are oppressed, the less you're needing for anything, why would you feel the need to turn to religion? I mean, even the Christian Bible, or the Jewish Bible, the Torah actually has stories about this of Israel. Going through periods where they were suffering and they were being oppressed and they were under attack and so on, and they'd be like, oh, God, save us, and then God would save them, and then they'd be like, okay, well, we're fine now, we don't need God, we're gonna go worship other things and stuff like that, and then they would have calamity again, blah, blah, blah. The idea, though, being, if you're wealthy and healthy, then you don't need to believe in a religion, you don't feel the need for God to save you because, I'm self-sufficient, I'm good to go, right? So I think that that's a more likely argument. Because the West is wealthier, they therefore are less likely to be religious. In fact, atheism is kind of a luxury of the freedoms of the West. Actually, you know what? No, as I'm thinking about this, I think we could actually take this a step further. What if it actually has less to do with, well, okay, let's say it's built upon that. What if we could say, actually, the freer the society, the wealthier and healthier and freer that society is going to be, then the more likely there are to be less religious. Because you can look at a place like the USSR, and they're not religious at all, but they were not free. They lived under communism. Complete state control there. And they had a lot of problems. Right? They were not wealthy, even though they were not religious. There was bad stuff going on there. You could look at different regions of the world where religion is very much a thing, but it's very much integrated into the power structure and is used to oppress people in certain ways or expect them to follow a certain religious code that might restrict their freedoms. And as a result, you could say maybe they're poorer as well. Whereas you look at the places in the West, whether that be Europe, whether that be the USA, where they have freedom, and freedom breeds wealth and happiness and health and so on. Lots of innovation, lots of technology, lots of human progress. And as you have those things, you're less likely to be religious. I don't know. It'd be interesting to look at it that way instead, wouldn't it? Yeah, I don't know. I've been waffling about this a little bit too long, but I just thought that was a very interesting argument, and there are some very easy counterpoints to make to that. I do think that there is a relation. I just think that maybe it is the reverse of what was suggested, and that would make sense because I think that I completely reversed how this was actually being calculated in the game. So, there we go. All right, I've been talking about that too long. We're still on freaking turn 1. What else did I want to do? Oh, I know what I wanted to do. Okay, so when I say that I'm going for a more libertarian-ish playthrough, I've said before, I'm not going for really an anarcho-capitalist kind of playthrough. I'm actually going for a more Milton Friedman style of approach. Milton Friedman was a Nobel Prize-winning economist. I have tremendous respect for the man. A lot of free market economics and stuff was propagated by him. He was definitely more on the libertarian side of things. He would pretty much argue that while there are certainly some ethical cases where you could argue the government should step in, as a general rule, the government is counterproductive. It often makes things worse rather than better, whether it intends to or not. All the good intentions of the world doesn't matter if it doesn't work, right? But he was definitely more on the libertarian side of things, where the free market should be allowed to do its own thing, lots less regulation and stuff like that. However, he was also a bit more pragmatic. He also believed that we lived in a world where, politically, that it was impossible to go to a completely free market society, and maybe that's not even completely ideal. Maybe the social net itself can exist, the social safety net, but it needs to be designed in such a way that it encourages people to get themselves out of poverty and be the best that they can be, rather than fall into a welfare trap, right? And along that extent, he actually had a very interesting idea called the negative income tax. That is to say, if you made below a certain income, the government would actually give you a check, and that money would scale based on how much you were making. The idea being, it was just enough to kind of give you a somewhat of a basic income, but it would encourage you to get out from under that poverty, because that's how you end up making more money. It's hard to explain, but basically imagine you made $10,000 below the poverty line. The government would then give you $5,000. And it scales in such a way that, like, let's say now you're $5,000 below the poverty line, and the government gives you $2,500 instead. It scales in that kind of a way. The idea being, you actually still have more income, more take-home pay, if you actually are working to get out from under the poverty. And that way the government kind of scales it a little bit, but it doesn't completely pay for you. It still try to incentivize you to get out of that. That was sort of his idea. And I don't think that there is a negative income tax in this mod pack per se. I have not seen anything about that. However, I think that we can create something pretty close to it with the use of 3 policies. The first of which I'm going to use is going to be the Earned Income Tax Credit. You may say, what? That's something we have today. Bear with me. By next video, I'm hoping to have this all done. We are going to increase the Earned Income Tax Credit. If you are below a certain wage, you're going to have some tax credits to try and allow you to keep a little bit more of your take-home pay. It actually is trying to be a little bit more progressive, I suppose, in its income tax distribution, but it's more of a tax credit. It encourages people to still work. You don't get this tax credit if you weren't working in the first place. So it's not welfare. It's just more of a progressive way of trying to get poorer people to keep their money. We're going to increase this to about $15 billion. And this is going to reduce unemployment, it's going to increase productivity slightly, but more importantly, it's going to improve the poor and middle earnings a fair bit. And also make them a little bit happier, which is pretty good. We only have 9 points left. You know one thing I'm going to do real quick, just for the heck of it? I'm going to increase our clean energy subsidies and reduce our CO2 emissions and increase our energy efficiency. I'm a little worried that as we continue to increase the GDP, this is going to come back to bite me and the pollution events will all start. But let's save the rest of our points. A meteor shower. Oh, that's kind of cool. Reduces productivity because everyone stood out there watching, but there you go. We actually still have a surplus despite increasing our spending a fair bit, so that's interesting. Huh, okay. Yeah, anyway, so what did I want to do next? We will impose some new work requirements. We're going to impose the compulsory work for the unemployed. If you're going to have welfare, I want you to go out there and work. And this should help reduce unemployment quite a bit. Actually, oh wow, wait a minute. Ooh, interesting. So this improves the environment. They're actually having people go out there and work to clean the streets and so on. Was that always a part of this, or is that relatively new? I'm not sure we want to invest too heavily in this, though. I mean, I'm looking at the poor and the socialists, and I'm thinking this might be a little bit too strong. We also don't want to decrease unemployment so much that we actually get the labor shortage back. So let's do something a little bit lower. This is actually not quite what I was expecting. I think they've rebalanced this. Okay, I kind of regret that decision a little bit. That's a lot of our political capital gone, though. Okay, let's move on then. I know what I want to get. Oh, hello. Hey, tooth decay is at an end. The fluoridation worked. Fluoridation, sorry. But air pollution is back. Yeah, as the GDP goes up, I expected that. Government software platform? What is this? Government institutions need to choose between a commercial software platform and an open source alternative. While the IT industry gives us a generous license offer, the hacker community addresses the economic and idealistic advantages of open source programs. The IT industry gives us a generous license offer. Why does the hacker community list out the advantages of open source? Wouldn't that make us a little bit more vulnerable to the hackers? Maybe. I guess I don't know much about the hacker community. Use a proprietary system. Commercial software is user-friendly and familiar. You don't need to be an engineer to use it. Well, that is certainly a problem with a lot of open source software. Teachers, doctors, police officers, and other government workers are more comfortable with these programs. It also supports the IT industry. Okay, so probably the computer industry. Open source. Transfer to an open source system takes some effort now, but it is beneficial in the future as all programmers can develop the code further. Today, the big software companies can exploit the government. Open source code is more resistant against internet crime? Huh. That's interesting. I feel like open source runs some risks that if people don't know what they're doing, they might leave themselves more vulnerable, but I am really worried about internet crime becoming a problem because we have incredibly high technology, and the higher our GDP gets, the more likely that's going to be a problem. Let's try it. And if I never get the internet crime event, I'm going to say that that is what saved us. By the way, our surplus is only going up. That's good. GDP is doing quite well. Okay. Here's where the fun's going to come in. You ready for this? I've saved up a lot of points. Why? Because in conjunction with the Earned Income Tax Credit, we are now going to create a flat income tax. A flat income tax is a tax where every citizen pays the same marginal rate regardless of their total income. The cleaner in the office pays the same rate as the CEO, though the CEO's total tax bill will be higher because he made more money. It is not progressive at all. It is intended to try and lower avoidance and evasion and stuff. It's also intended to kind of try to boost the economy a little bit and be more fair, quote-unquote, because everyone's being treated the same regardless of how much they actually make. I've always argued that the progressive income tax is not fair at all, but that's deliberate. It is deliberately unfair to try and scale or rig the system a little bit to try and help those who need the help the most. That's sort of the point, but I would never argue that the progressive tax is fair. In this particular playthrough, with a libertarian system, I do kind of want to go toward the flat income tax. Inequality will probably become an issue, probably. Compared to what we have right now, yes, the CEOs will probably pay less tax. But it's still going to make me a ton of money, and hopefully we start seeing some good benefits. For example, I don't think that the downside to productivity and stuff is quite as bad as the progressive income tax. Working week goes up, productivity goes down, unemployment goes up. That's going to be interesting, but I think that as our GDP rises, the unemployment is going to solve itself. And again, if it gets too low, we have a labor shortage, so maybe that's okay. It's going to impact earnings a little bit more evenly than it would before. We're going to go for, let's say, about a 30-ish% flat income tax. Now, the problem with this right now, and this is one of the things I find a little bit frustrating about Democracy 3, is the flat income tax is going to be charged on top of the existing income tax. It's not automatically replacing it. It's just adding it on top of it. So right now, at least for the next couple of months, all Swedish people are now paying like a 60% tax rate. So I'm sorry, but that's what we've got. No, the income tax here, though, it does increase equality because it's more progressive. But you can see that it inversely affects the earnings a little bit more than it was before, and it increases the black market, and it reduces productivity even more than the flat income tax did. It also reduces private schools. So what we want to do is eventually now get rid of that income tax. The flat income tax here, yes, it exacerbates equality a little bit more, but the impact on productivity is not so much. The impact on private schools is not so bad. The problem is the unemployment. That's one of the reasons that the flat income tax is a little bit harder. That said, you may say, why the heck would you ever go for the flat income tax in this game then if it's not necessarily better right away? One of the big reasons is if you do have corporate exodus, kind of tax evasion events, crisis events happening in your country, the flat tax will help reduce that, whereas the income tax makes it worse. So that is one way of combating that. We're going for more theme, but it also is going to work in conjunction, I think, with my more negative income tax rate. So here we go. Pro-drug band on tour. A scandalous music group called the Weed Blowers plan to tour the country. Conservatives complain that their lyrics romanticize drug use and argue that pro-drug songs should not be allowed to play on national stadiums or in national radio. Here's the thing, we have a drug addiction problem, so I'm going to introduce an ethical code and say no. That's not very libertarian, it's not very liberal, in fact, in the first place, but we need to try and reduce the drug addiction, which, by the way, is going down, actually. I'm kind of surprised. It's working, more or less. How's the black market? Ooh, the black market's starting to go away, too. Yes. Okay, that's what I wanted to see. Now, rather than tax the Swedish people to death, let's go ahead and cancel out the income tax. The good news is we're actually making about the exact same amount of money with our flat income tax that we were from the income tax. So that's actually pretty good. In fact, whoa! We have a 200 billion crown reserve in the nation right now. Okay, I'm very curious to see how this is going to impact our economy, because we just eliminated the income tax, the progressive income tax. So I'm very curious how it's going to work. Now that said, it's not completely perfect yet, because the income tax credits, the poor and the lower middle class ultimately still have the tax system slightly rigged to their favor. Also, the high income tax, the high bracket income tax, still technically exists. I may have to get rid of this at some point, but at least for now, that's still a thing. So it is still slightly progressive, it's just not as progressive. So there you go. We'll see how that works. Anyway, I got rid of that. What else do I want to do this video? Not a whole lot right now, actually, to be honest. The next part, can I do it now? I can. Do I want to do it now? Not yet. The next part will be the basic income. So on top of the earned income tax credit, the flat tax rate, and the basic income, a low basic income, that I think is the closest I can come to the negative income tax. So a certain guaranteed amount that especially affects the poor and the middle class, but as you get out from under that poverty line, everyone is taxed at the same low-ish rate. And I say low-ish, I mean 30%, which is still pretty high in my book, but we need the money still, so there's that. That's something I'm going to do in the future, but for now, let's wait and see what our surplus looks like after we've let the dust settle, before I commit myself to potentially spending up to almost 80 billion crowns. It's a little bit much. Instead, let's spend on some other things that could be useful. What's something new? What's something we haven't done? Sports venues. This might actually help reduce the obesity quite a bit. Let's try it. Yes, actually, it greatly reduces obesity. Okay, that's something we want. It reduces unemployment, it improves foreign relations, it greatly improves health, which is good, and patriots love it. The youth love it, too. Oh, this is great. This is actually something that's always good. It just costs you money. Okay, yeah, that single-handedly might be enough to actually get rid of obesity in Sweden. Nice! That's something I would definitely like to see. Anything else I need to worry about right now? Let's see. Drug addiction is still on its way down. Asthma epidemic is still a problem, and a lot of it has to do with the tobacco. We could definitely tax it more, but that's only going to make our equality worse, which I'm expecting to start going down. As far as the game is concerned, now the fact that people have unequal incomes, that is to say, some people are incredibly wealthy, that's the problem. Here's the thing, if we're going for a libertarian playthrough, I don't care about income inequality. Not really. Reason being, if somebody produces 1,000,000 times more than the average person, then he should make 1,000,000 times more than that person. That's considered fair. It's anything less than that is decentivizing him. And frankly, the libertarian would argue that income inequality is not... Sorry, perfect income equality is not actually attainable in a free society. Actually, I think it was Dave Rubin I saw who said, in a truly free society, no one is completely equal, and in a truly equal society, no one is completely free. And I would argue that there's some truth to that. The only way to have proper, true income equality would be in a more communist system where no one's really free, everyone's subjected to that kind of forced government redistribution system. So there's certainly that to be to look at. Libertarians wouldn't care about this. What we do care about is the overall well-being of the poor, but the fact that Bill Gates makes several orders of magnitude more than I do is not the concern. In fact, he's done several orders of magnitude more for the economy, so that's fine, that's fair, that's okay. I think that's the more the libertarian argument. There are some libertarians who watch this this series, so let me know what you think of that, because we're not going to be focusing quite as much on that as we had before. I do think that we want to go for maybe one more thing. What would be okay? Let's go for stamp out racism for the heck of it. Let's try to reduce racial tension. Since we did change up our immigrant language courses, I don't want racial tension to be a big problem. So let's just reduce that a little bit. And that is all of our political capital, and that is where we're going to have to end this video. Some huge, sweeping changes to Sweden and how this is going to work. Completely changed it. I guarantee you some people are going to be mad at me in the comments section, but that is how it's going to work. Just trust me, okay? I don't know what's going to happen either. I don't do this very often in Democracy 3. I am curious to see where the chips are going to fall. I want to know what's going to happen if we go for a more ideologically driven playthrough instead. Thank you all very much for watching. I do hope you enjoyed. If so, then be sure to hit that like button, leave a comment, and subscribe. And I, as always, will see you guys next time.